Okay, we're holding Siman Tzadik Ches in Hilchos Taaruvot, if Zayin. Depending on how you're learning the Shulchan Aruch, how you're learning the Siman, perhaps some may go over Sif Zayin very quickly and just talk about it briefly and not go too much in depth, which is, by the way, Ilan, what I noticed that they did in the sheet. So I'm not going to go in that particular style. The whole shir will be about Sif Zayin and a little bit about Sif Ches. Sif Zayin speaks about eggs, and I really think that this does deserve a lot more attention than perhaps what others would give to it. Since Sif Zayin and Siman Tzadik Ches does involve a little bit other halachas, including Hilchos Dam, blood, Siman Samach Vov, and Hilchos of Beitzim, of eggs, Siman Pevov, these are all simanim that you may not have gotten to, and some who learn Yore Deah may never get to. The halachas of blood, which blood is mutter, which one can you have, drink, ones you cannot, and eggs. What are the problems with eggs? All kinds of issues that come up with eggs. So I decided to give pretty much an overview about these two areas and how it relates to this seif. So a little bit about eggs. As you know, in Judaism, there are simanim for identifying kosher birds. Even though the Torah gives simanim just for fish and for animals, wild or domestic animals, the Torah does not mention, the written Torah does not mention simanim of birds. It only tells us a whole list of which animals are not clean. And generally, what the Torah does is usually mention the minority. So, this list, and which includes certain species and subspecies, because there's a lot of subspecies, are forbidden. However, in the Torah Shebal Peh, the explanation, the details of the Torah Shebechtav, we find simanim of fowl, of birds. One of them being that it has an etzba yesera, an additional finger towards the back, if you've seen a chicken. That it has a zephek, which in English is translated a crop, C-R-O-P, and it has a kurkavan sheniklaf. It has the gizzard, which you can peel off the outer layer, the outer skin. There are additional simanim. The Gemara says, for example, if you're in doubt, just check out with which birds this bird associates with. If it associates with clean birds, and perhaps you have another siman or so, you can assume it's a clean bird. But the halacha is the conclusion that today, at least, we do not eat any bird, even though we are experts in recognizing the simanim, unless we have a Masara, unless we have a tradition. And that was one of the issues with turkeys when they came to this country. Turkey, is that a kosher bird or not? Not everybody remembers eating turkey in Vilna. Yeah, so they had to rely on communities that did, and that was sufficient. Okay, so that's easy as far as birds. There's a lot of birds, Baruch Hashem, that we could eat. The question is, however, is with the eggs. As you know, there is a cloud that whatever comes out of something which is unclean itself, right? You know which one is the exception to that? Honey, right? Even though it's coming from a bee, it's not really coming out from a bee. It is somehow processed through the bee. Nevertheless, it's one of those that the Chachamim point out as an exception of sorts. But eggs, of course, any egg that comes from a non-kosher bird will definitely be usher for us to eat. Not only are eggs that come from a non-kosher bird usher, eggs that come from a treifa is usher, as opposed to a nevela. What is the difference between a nevela and a treifa in an animal? An animal that is a pure animal, which we may slaughter, can be rendered a nevela if it was not slaughtered properly. It was shot, electrocuted, the shochet did not do his job right. It becomes a nevela. The animal is slaughtered properly, everything is okay, but the lungs, for example, are checked, and there are some sirchas, some adhesions, as they're called in English, that render it a treif, a hole in the lungs, and all kinds of other issues that can come up. The animal is a treifa. What's the nafkamina between a nevela and a treifa? Tuma. Nevela has tuma. Treifa does not have tuma, because what has happened with this animal? You've slaughtered it properly. That means that you've given it a good tikkun, because according to the Kabbalah, the shechita is a form of tikkun for the animal. It elevates the animal to a higher status. So therefore, if that was done right, all it is a treifa, then there's no tuma. But if the animal was not slaughtered properly and so forth, then you have tuma as well. It's a nevela, it's a cadaver like any other dead animal. So eggs coming from a nevela or a treifa make a difference. Is it a treifa or a nevela? Chicken, okay? You slaughtered it, you didn't slaughter it properly, it's a nevela. You slaughtered it properly, but there's something wrong with it, it's a treifa. And this will make a difference with the eggs too. Because what did we just say? Eggs coming out from an unclean source is usur for us to eat. So the same is true midaraisa. Eggs that came from a treifa, milk even, if the animal is a treifa, the egg that is formed while this animal is a treifa cannot be eaten. Min Torah. Whereas an egg that came from a nevela is okay. Okay, why?
How did it come from a nevela? It was already dead?
Yeah, no problem. Why? Because when was the egg formed? That's what matters. The egg was formed while this was an animal that was a treifa, then it's treif. The animal was okay, just it became a nevela. I don't care, and I cannot eat the meat, but the eggs are fine. Now, so once we understand this cloud, we can apply it to a non-kosher bird, of course. Anything that comes out from a non-kosher animal, non-kosher bird, therefore, is treif. So the eggs of a non-kosher bird are treif. If that's the case, what if I'm going to Chinatown now, and I want to buy some eggs? Can I trust the goy that tells me that these are clean eggs, these are kosher eggs? We're talking about nemanos again. Remember the issue of nemanos, trust. We rely on a goy.
So the eggs of a treifa would also be as already dead, while the treifa is still alive.
While it's still alive. Even while it's still alive.
How would I know if it's treifa?
If you somehow knew.
So I could be eating eggs all day long that are
yes,
treif.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't know because the animal happens to survive.
I'm going to talk about that. How do we eat egg?
There's no treif animal?
Right. There's no tumor. That's the only difference between
But you're
treif.
still not allowed to eat it.
I can't eat a treifa animal or a nevela. This cow is a nevela. It wasn't slaughtered properly. This cow was slaughtered perfect, but they found a hole in the lungs. So it's treif.
And the milk that I took from that cow that's treif before I slaughtered it, that milk is usur as
Exactly.
But not because of
No. If I knew for sure, the problem is sometimes the treifa comes after I took the eggs and the milk.
I know that.
Right, it all depends how much in advance it was, what kind of a treifa it was, if I know when the treifa came about.
The animal was healthy until I find it.
It could be. It all depends. It's not so simple. It's not as simple. It's a derisive. It's not simple. And they have discussions about the milk today, coming from a treifa. How do you deal with it?
Which they had as an example about 20 years or 30 years ago, where they use staples.
Yes, exactly. Where they're actually possibly making the animal treif.
To let out the gas from the belly. They would
Sure.
Cut it open and staple it.
And that's a little bit also the problem with giving it a shock. Even though you're not killing it with a shock, you just wanted to calm it down. There was a big halachic questions about the electrical shock. If that would make perhaps something in the krum hamoach, in the brain, some defect which would render it treif. One of the treifas does concern the area of the brain. So anyway, there's a lot of issues as a result of it. But I think this is interesting to know, to learn. That's why I decided to.
Definitely. Right now I can't eat egg.
No, you'll see how. You'll see how. And by the way, would you like it scrambled? Does it make a difference? Yes, it will. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll see. Just briefly, we'll talk about it, then we go on to the halacha. So, when buying an egg, there's an issue of nemanos. Also, so it would not be enough for the goy to tell you, listen, this is from a kosher bird, a pure bird. He would have to tell you which bird. You know where this is really an issue today? It happened to me about a year or two ago. Somebody gave me quail eggs. What did you try them? He says. I said, okay, wait a minute. Am I allowed to have it? Well, quail is kosher bird. Are you sure it's a quail? Okay. Where'd you get it, by the way? In Chinatown. They have, and they're very cute, they're very small, sometimes people like to use it, and of course, they're kosher, and they taste very similar to regular chicken eggs, very similar, they're just small, very small. There's different kinds of quails.
So how do you know if it's really our quail? Not something
Right.
else?
So you have to actually determine. So that's what I'm getting at. Because there's one kind that may be a problem. It's not necessarily that all quail are okay, or certain eggs look like quail eggs and may not be quail eggs. So what we need, other than the goy telling us that this is from a kosher bird, he has to tell us the name of the bird. But sometimes it's not it's not enough. We have certain concerns. Is it true? Is it possible? Maybe not. Is there any way that I can look at the egg and tell if it's a kosher bird or not? And the answer is yes. The Chacham gave us simanim of what a kosher egg or egg from a kosher bird looks like. Basically, if the two sides of the egg are sharp or round, it could be a non-kosher bird. Very possibly. Because a kosher bird's egg usually is sharp on one side, and towards the bottom it's more oblate, I think they call it, more oval. Flatter, okay? So that is one siman of a kosher bird's egg. Not that the two sides are the same, either flat or round or sharp. If the two sides are exactly the same, you may suspect this is not a non-kosher bird. Plus, inside, in a non-kosher bird, you will have, depending on the bird, the yellow on the outside and the white on the inside.
Oh, that's a good.
Whereas in a kosher bird, we know that the yellow is inside.
The trait of bird, what?
Yeah, the yellow and the white are in different places. In other words, in a kosher bird, you will not find the yellow outside. It will always be in the middle and the center. Whereas with a non-kosher bird, you can find it the other way around, and that will tell you that this is not.
And that's always the case?
No.
So it can be that you have
There are some.
kosher bird that gives you the yellow.
No, the kosher bird will never give you the inverted.
That's what I'm
But a non-kosher bird, you may have all kinds.
So in other words, it's not sufficient to include a non-kosher egg, but it's sufficient to establish a kosher egg.
Yes, exactly, yes. And,
So if the yellow is outside and the white is inside kosher egg.
yes.
And this has nothing to do with species.
The species is not a clean species. Now, what happens is, if based on this simanim, most of us recognize kosher eggs to begin with by looking at them. That's called tvias ayin. In the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, you will come across tvias ayin later on, perhaps in Hilchos Taaruvot as well. Tvias ayin means I can identify something, I can see, I can recognize it. Is this it? Is it not it? Tvias ayin. So we have a tvias ayin for most eggs anyway. Whether it's and what are the majority of the eggs amongst us that are kosher? Either from a duck, from a goose, from a chicken, and the like. But here and there, occasionally, you may have other birds that are kosher. That pheasant, quail, and so forth. What are the non-kosher birds that you may occasionally find? Or non-kosher eggs, I should say. It could be from a turtle even. There are some people that use turtle eggs. Ostrich eggs is very popular these days in some circles.
They're large.
But they're very large. So that one is not too difficult to tell. It stands out very, very much.
Must be a chicken egg? I want to see chickens.
Yeah. But anyway, the halacha is today that even if we know the simanim, we don't take a chance, right? We don't just take a chance. We really have to know for certain that this is a kosher egg. But the advantage that we have an advantage today, is that ein of tomim motzui beinenu som. I think as the Ramah says, there's not so many unclean birds' eggs amongst us. So even though you have to really, really know for sure, in this case you can go by the majority. So that's no. So how do we eat eggs? Okay. How do we eat eggs? We assume that the majority of the eggs out there are of the same kind. As opposed to what? As opposed to the following scenario. If you have eggs of chicken, they're all chicken eggs, but who's to say that all the chicken eggs are, perhaps some of them are treif?
That's a big problem.
Okay? Now, or something else, okay? Which is what we're going to be talking about today. This is where the fun begins. All right, we go by rov, but there's another problem with eggs. What else can happen in eggs other than an egg being from a kosher bird?
Of an embryo. And
Right.
It wasn't slaughtered.
Right. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the beginning stages of embryo, plus the more common problem, and that is blood.
Can
But
you
isn't
go back for a
the
moment?
blood already from coming in embryo?
Not necessarily. That's what we're talking.
But the other blood is.
There's different. That's what I'm going to be talking about next. Different kinds of bloods. Yeah.
Before you go,
All right.
How are you going by road to a Suffolk Isidore?
It's
You
not.
need to eat.
Yeah.
You
No.
don't know for sure that this
Yeah.
was. You
Yeah.
go to Ralph's, you buy. There's no egg.
Right.
How do you know the egg?
Yeah. No. So that's what I'm saying. You have this rov. That rov bitzink sherim him. The majority of eggs that we see in the market are from a kosher source. It's an established rov that you can go by. You can use. Rov is rov.
He seems to only apply the law if it is, sir.
That's when you have that's definitely.
Suffolk.
Yeah.
But you don't know what the
Yeah.
chicken.
Yeah.
You see a dozen eggs. They're in the nice container.
Yeah.
There's no hexure.
Yeah, no, what you're talking about.
But we know it's also
Right. But what you're talking about is the difference between ischazik isura and not ischazik isura. I don't know for sure that I have an isura. You want to tell me that there is a remote possibility? I tell you there's a rov. A rov is perfectly fine in that case, and that's what we'll be eventually learning in Hilchos Taaruvot. That's where the real complex issues of rov comes into. If you have a chazaka, if you have a rov, yeah.
We even had a roiv so far, min b'min, even if I know with certainty that chalev fell into the pot, and I know that I have
Yes.
I have a fat,
That's
kosher
that's
fat.
like gabi bitul, right?
I'm saying so.
Right.
So I mean, be matel b'roiv.
So
Yeah, obviously, if it's dry and dry.
dry and dry,
Robe,
right?
It is
Yeah.
robe, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So we'll briefly talk about that.
It's robe is the.
Yeah,
robe is
I
okay.
was going to mention that soon too, but from the perspective of bitul, yeah. But here there's also the perspective of suffik deoraisa lechumra, and where is that? Where do I have that kind of situation? So bitul is another area, but the suffik deoraisa lechumra with a treifa is in the following situation: I have 2 eggs, so I don't have rov.
Ah, well, you don't
Okay.
have no. Okay.
So therefore, what do I do? So it's a suffix deraisa. If this is a treifa, or is this a non-treifa? Right? This could be an egg of a treifa. In other words, I know the one, I don't know which one, right? It's a
So you're
suffix
saying for
deraisa.
sure you know one of the 2 eggs is a.
Yeah, a better example is for example,
Because otherwise you'd have the
yeah.
last 2 eggs in any meat.
Right, exactly. Let's say you have a suffix. Maybe I should read it from the Mechaber itself. Suffix treifa, suffix nevela. Okay, let's read it from the Mechaber.
In other words, I have one piece that comes from one, the other one's from a treifa.
Huh?
I have
No, no, no.
one piece from a and I'm in real trouble.
Suffix imi beitzes nevela or imi beitzes shchuta.
Alright.
What?
What's
Siman peivav and beitzin. Let's begin with the first example. Beitzo, if I have a suffix, if it's a shchuta or if it's a nevela, is this egg coming from the good chicken or from the nevela chicken? Muteres. Afilu belo taaruvos. Why? Because what did we say before? The egg of a nevela is muter. It's only asur midirabanan. Why is it asur midirabanan? Because of the isur that applies to treifas. They also make an isur. Aval suffix im hi beitzo treifa or beitzo shchuta. What am I looking at? Is this a treifa or a shchuta? I really have a real suffix. I have a suffix, right? What it is, it's asura. Okay? In the other situation, beitza nevelo treifa afilo nigmera, even though they're complete, shekayotzebo nigkeres bashuk, that they're sold in the marketplace, asura, bafilo nisarvo, even if they're mixed, be'elef, in 1,000 kulon asuros. Okay, so here you have another situation of taaruvos, of mixtures, of even 1,000, it's asur. Why? Okay, that's a little bit related to our seif today. Why are beitzim different than regular taaruvos? Why should there be any difference between them? Okay, so that is as far as the beitzim themselves. What about the dam? Let's say we're talking about a regular bird, a regular kosher bird, a regular egg, but you find blood in it. So besides the issue of egg, the source of the egg, we now have to determine what to do about the blood. Is the blood mutter or blood asur? Well, we've learned about maybe you've heard about dam dam hanefesh, of the animal when you slaughter it. That's treif, of course, that's chorus, that's also for us to eat, to drink. However, dam shchuta, dam ha'ivorim, as it is called, if you learned Melicha, you may have come across it, is only midirabanan if it moved. In other words, the inside internal blood, right, the porish. As opposed to what? As opposed to blood coming out of the animal as it's being slaughtered. That's the only one that is also chorus. Whether it's an animal, clean or unclean, a chicken, anything, that's the dam that the Torah forbids for us to have. But internal blood that we sought to get out, that is not also midoraisa, it's also midrabanan, as it's called also dam tamtzis, the different kind of blood that remains in the animal or it comes out after the dam hanefesh. These are all midrabanan because they moved. What does that mean they moved if they did not move? In theory, technically, any internal blood in this piece of meat that has not moved, if I want to eat it raw, I can, without Melicha. Technically, whoever wants to eat raw meat would not require, and there's no issue whatsoever to eat that blood that has not. So that's blood in animals. Yes. Yeah. Understand? It would not, all that is not midoraisa. Right. At least not midoraisa. Midrabanan is different. Obviously, the organs is different. Yes. Actually, with your question, it would depend also on the organ. If you have blood, it's all blood, the liver. Now, so that's with the regular blood. What about blood that is in fish? We know it's not a problem. What about the blood in an egg? That's our question. The blood in an egg can be a problem. It can. It all depends where you find it in the egg, or what kind of an egg it is. Most of the eggs that we buy today are called eggs safna de aro. Safna de aro means that the chicken laid it without a rooster being present. So how did it lay an egg? Just naturally through the warmth, safna of the warmth of the earth. Every so often it lays eggs. And that's the eggs we have.
For the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
That's what that's the case.
Yeah. However, there are eggs that may have been fertilized by a rooster. And those are the eggs that can produce a chick. So when people raise chicken, they either raise them for the eggs, they either raise them for slaughter, or they raise them for the cheeks. One of three things. To reproduce. Either one, or two, or three, or all three. They may have sections in their farm. The problem is, once you have a rooster within a certain distance, there's a good chance, there's at least always a suffix, if that egg possibly was fertilized. Yeah, you do? And if an egg is fertilized, it has other dinim. Because it can begin to form. It's a problem in itself if you can eat it or not. Right?
Unslaughtered egg?
Yeah. Plus, it could be an issue with the blood that you find in it. So you cracked an egg, you're making a cake, or you're making an omelet, or whatever. And you see blood. Now what do? If there's a rooster there, if it's a fertilized egg, that blood is a problem, is a real issue. Especially, according to most shittas, if you find it in the yellow part. Because finding blood in the yellow means that it was already beginning to form. That's the beginning. And according to some of the shittas, that blood is even asur midoraisa. Like the real thing. It's beginning to form.
Is that only when you have
Yes, right. But if it's in other parts of the egg, not in the yellow, supposedly you can just remove the blood. You still have to remove it, but then you could eat it. Whereas if it's in the yellow, you would not be able. You would have to throw away the egg.
Both the things that if there was a rooster.
Right. So far, this is the real blood, real problem, according to everyone. According to all the shittas, but there would be a difference in the shittas, whether you hold it to rice or not, whether you should you throw away the whole egg, even if it's not in the yellow. Yeah, like we are machmir in some cases. Well, even if it's not in the yellow, because there's different shittas, perhaps it begins from the top and goes to the bottom. So does it only have to be in the yellow? There's different shittas as to what makes it a deraisa, what is it only derabbanan? Do you have to throw away the whole egg? What if it's all mixed? What if the eggs are mixed? I already threw it in, there's a bunch of eggs now. Well, if the eggs are not mixed, I see them separately and one of them has blood, I just can remove that egg and throw it out. But if I knew that egg had real blood and it's mixed, it's a problem. The whole mixture now. It can be a problem. You can't separate it. So egg coming from a fertilized egg, which means a rooster was involved, would create problems here. If I do in fact find blood.
If you say
Right.
with the egg is a solid,
I can separate them. There's no mixture.
While
I
it's
can
still-
easily
while
separate
it's still
it.
in the shell. While it's still in the shell.
No, it's not in the shell.
It's
It's not in the
You've
shell.
got 6 eggs that you crack and get
Then how do you recognize which is which egg?
You can recognize them. You see them.
recognize it.
Oh, they're lying
They're
apart.
lying.
Not
They're lying in.
mixed
They're not
together.
really
They're
mixed.
scrambled.
They're not scrambled
That's
yet.
not
Right.
but they do start to, the
Yeah.
liquid starts to run from one to the...
Yeah.
You say that's not an issue.
If you can separate them. If they're already mixed and one of them had blood in the wrong spot,
Even if they're mixed, but
Yeah.
several...
right, then you can remove the one.
outside of that goes to mix
Right.
with each other.
Right.
This is,
Right. When is it a problem? When you know for a fact that it had forbidden blood in the wrong place, and then it got all mixed up. Then it could be a problem with the whole
So what
Taaruvot.
does if it's only half mixed?
Well, it depends if you can remove the entire egg or not.
So as long as it's distinct, then
It's
you can
distinct, then
remove
you-
the
l'chora,
parts of the
yeah,
egg, you
yeah.
can remove it.
Exactly.
If it's already become a little bit mixed so that part of the egg already is together with others, then you
Yeah.
can.
Right.
Or you remove all those eggs that might have been mixed with
Correct.
that area.
Right. Now, what happens?
Is there hanan by eggs?
Well, no. What happens now if we have an egg that was not fertilized and we see blood? How did the blood get there to begin with? So some say it's some deformity in the formation of the egg in one of the cells, the membrane. I don't recall exactly the details of what it is. I don't think they know themselves how it happened. But it's a freak thing. It's not but it can happen. But it's not the real blood.
It's not a
There's
blood
no-
that forbids the egg.
Right. There's no real efroach, no real chick that will be formed
So it's
from
only
this.
marzain.
No, not even Marasayan so much, yeah. Right. It's not even usr.
We do remove it though.
Yes, we remove it because of that, of
And
the
we check
Marasayan.
for it.
Yeah, that we do remove, but the egg itself really is not really usr.
Self-assured,
Right?
that's
There's
what we
no
need.
problem. What should it be a problem? Right? So therefore, if you get it all mixed up, or what about the big cans that bakers buy? Maybe some of it has a blood, but the majority of eggs, just almost all eggs in commercial quantities, is safna de'ara. Safna de'ara means it's not fertilized. It does not involve a rooster, whatever they're called, mass produced. Yeah, we know for a fact that they know that this now. But then it is possible. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva that somebody wants to ask them a question about it. But it can be that some farmer would want to fill in some of his eggs that he's missing from the fertilized eggs. Perhaps it's not, containers he doesn't have. Yeah, but we don't have to be choshesh for that. You don't have to be that concerned that that's a possibility that came and perhaps, that's first of all you have to find the blood and then assume that it's from that too. But some say it is a problem because to find blood, perhaps this is an indication that it is coming from a fertilized egg. Because otherwise, why should you find blood?
Even have
So-
roosters.
Right. But that's the opinion. There is one opinion that said, but wait a minute, it should be a concern because the fact that I found blood already tells me that there might be fertilized eggs in there. But we know that blood comes about for all kinds of reasons other than fertilized eggs. We don't have to be concerned. So therefore, today, you find blood, you remove the blood.
Of course, if they're cage-free.
If it's in the yellow, you just throw it out. Why do you throw it out? Because it's a hefset me'at. It's not a big loss. It's not a big loss, and the Ramah seems to be machmir quite a bit when it comes to eggs and blood. And it says you throw it away, you don't deal with it. But it's good to know the me'ikar adin. If your wife ever tells you, what do I do now? But by mistake I didn't realize it. I mixed it with the rest of the eggs. You don't have to worry about it because.
How about hard-boiled eggs?
Exactly. What if it's already hard boiled? You don't have to suspect. How you're going to see the blood. That it may have had blood, and I shouldn't have cooked it before I checked it.
I gotta check it.
No. Before you cooked it, should have checked it. But
Crack it open. You're not gonna have.
right, you're right. In that case, you're not going to have a hard boiled egg. But in other words, should I check it and not make a hard? In other
Right.
words, no, I don't have to. So.
My wife always is the one should be. Have a
Oh, very nice, very good. Did somebody suggest that for her, or is she on her
Really,
own?
that's what she.
Yeah,
because of raw egg either.
right. Usually, this is not a problem. If it is blood, if there is a blood, it's safna daro.
Maybe you have cage-free eggs.
Yeah,
You
we
buy the
will-
cage-free ones?
yes.
So then you have to do that. If you buy cage-free ones, you have to do that.
Yes, then your cage-free bird. Ilan is right. He has a point. There may be sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that true? That's the type of egg you buy.
Yeah.
Why is that?
They have to,
Oh, only because of cruelty? I heard that some eggs are even taste better if they, cage-free, they grow in the
The
wild.
cage-free also, they do taste.
They even have a different color. Yeah, is that right?
Yes.
And where do you buy them?
Some,
And do you trust them that it's for sure cage-free?
Erewhon,
Do you for sure know that it's
trust them.
Yeah.
You trust them like you trust milk.
cage-free? But Elon, does cage-free always mean
No,
that
it's not with certainty, but it could.
there can be a rooster?
Right. It's
Right.
not with certainty, but it could be because they're not being.
But I would agree with that. Yeah, that could be an issue. So you would want to check that.
And would it help to boil three fish cream?
Oh yeah, then you have the rub. But we will.
How
that's-
do you know that
Yeah.
you don't have two with?
Yeah, but now we're going to see that sometimes we need more than rov. That's what we're going to see about beitzim today. Eggs is something very interesting. That there's a special takana that you sometimes need 61 versus 60, and that's what we'll be talking a little bit about now. What makes eggs different? But before we go to that, just another couple of halachas about eggs. You have an egg that is non-kosher. Let's say it's a nevela, it's a treifa, it's a tmeya from a non-kosher bird that got cooked with other birds, with other eggs, or was put into the chalent, was put into the food that you're preparing. You mixed it. Okay, what now? Will it be a problem? Why should there be a problem? Maybe there's no tam coming out of it. So the halacha is, so long as that egg which is forbidden for me to eat has a klipa, has a shell, it's not a problem. That klipa prevents any flavoring from being emitted from the egg. Yeah.
I still have to throw it out because it's not kosher.
Yeah, that egg I can't eat. It's not bottle, as we will see. But if that non-kosher egg, for whatever reason it's not kosher, except in the event of our siman, of our seif, where we actually have an egg of a different, an egg with sheyesh bo efroach. So in Sif Zayin, we have a beitza sheyesh bo efroach, an egg that actually has an efroach, a cheek grown. That's going to be different. Or tipas dam, which is usser, the type that is usser. But let's assume we don't have that kind of an egg. We have a regular egg that is from a treifa that I can't have, from a nevela that I can't, from a tmeya, from a
Stork.
a stork, yes. That was cooked by mistake, of course. What now? As long as it has a klipa on it, a shell, nothing is emitted from it. It's just like water. It doesn't do anything, not to other eggs being cooked with it, or to other food being cooked with it. It doesn't affect it. Of course, it's not bottle, just like that. By itself, I mean, if I see it, I have to remove it, and I still need a certain amount keneged. Now, what happens, however, if the beitza is klufa, if it's peeled, that's when the trouble begins.
Before we peel it, one question. We know that if we cook an egg in the chulun,
Right.
the egg itself becomes flesh. And not to make us fleshy for cheese
I'm
afterwards.
going to get to that.
But
Good-
we
good
can't
point.
have that egg with cheese.
Good point.
So why would in our
Oh,
case...
very good. You heard Dylan's question. The egg becomes fleshik. Okay, good. That's coming up.
Course.
That's coming up. Oh, that's coming up soon. So what if the peitzah is klufa? It's peeled. Then the trouble begins. Then you need a certain amount. And before I get to what amount I need, I'm going to get to Elon's question. All right. If the beitza is klufa and it has no shell, that means whatever is there does give flavor to whatever else is there. Whether that which is in the pot are eggs as well that have a shell, or whether it's regular food like potatoes. So what am I beginning to see? I'm beginning to see that an egg that has a shell does not emit a flavor, but eggs that have a shell are porous enough to absorb from elsewhere.
Interesting. Between absorbing
And emitting, exactly. For eggs. An egg that has a shell, that is treif, I'm saved.
So why do we say egg? The shell.
Right.
You can absorb but not emit.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
scientifically, this is not.
Yeah. No, but even in a kli, as you will, or not in a kli, but actually in food, you will see a difference when we're talking about food that is the klal, as it is emitting, it is not absorbing. Right?
Yes.
That in that rule, there's also small differences. There's a difference whether it cannot, does it have the ability to emit that which it absorbed, or does it only emit that which is from itself? A piece of meat that falls into Gdera Chalevis, in Basar b'Chalav, okay, what am I concerned with? I'm concerned with the flavor of the meat falling into the milk, right? So even if I removed it, what am I concerned with? I'm concerned with the meat flavor in the milk. So we have a kafela, according to the Mechaber, taste this milk, no meat flavor, kosher. In a few seconds, I can have flavor from meat coming out. But what about the milk that entered the basar?
Yeah.
Why don't I say that came out and it's Hanan right away?
Well, not right away, but it's...
But why not right away?
Because while it's absorbing, it doesn't...
It doesn't give off that which it absorbed, it doesn't give off again.
Well, it does eventually.
It does, the meat itself is being emitted. The flavor of the meat is coming out.
No, but here we're absorbing substance of the milk.
It did absorb, because that chaticha remains asur.
No, but while the meat is absorbing the milk, the substance,
Right?
it does not give off the milk substance absorbed.
Exactly. Only that it does not give off,
Right.
but it does give off its own
Meat taste.
meat taste.
Taste and substance.
Right. So that's a chiluk over here. When a piece of meat absorbs, okay, as it is absorbing, it will not re-emit that which it absorbed, as long as it is emitting its own flavor. Meat flavor is coming out into the milk. It is absorbing a little bit of milk too. It has that ability to absorb too. In that particular scenario, it does have the ability to give off its own, and to absorb the milk, because that's where the piece of meat remains asur. But when it does not have the ability to expel that which it absorbed while it is expelling or emitting its own flavor. Okay, so I mean, why did I bring this up? It's an interesting also difference in that there are situations where eggs, they can absorb somehow, as Ilan pointed out, they're porous, they are porous. So they can become fleshik eggs. They can, somehow get the flavor from elsewhere. But if the egg has a shell, it in itself will not give off. Somehow, to give off, that shell will protect it from. Will not allow it.
Protect us from it.
From it, yes, exactly. Now, so that makes a difference, therefore, with eggs. But in the event we have Beitza Klufa, that's when the problems begin. So let's talk about, before we go to the Mechaber, what happens when you have a Beitza Klufa. So when you have a Beitza Klufa, regardless of it's Nevela or Treifa or Tmeya, you need 61. Why do you need 61? Why not 60? You need 61 in the eggs against the egg that is not kosher, and you may need 60, not 61, in the tafshil, in the food where this non-kosher eggs is, to be mevatel what? To be mevatel only the pleto, only that which is coming out of the non-kosher egg which is peeled. We have a non-kosher egg that is peeled, it's causing a problem because it's not peeled, it has flavor, it gives off flavor. How many times do I need? Not the usual shishim. If there are other eggs in this pot, I need 61. If it's a regular tafshil, I need 60, according to the Mechaber.
If you have a tough, is it 60 or 60?
60, yeah.
Because the other-
I think so, yeah, I believe so. These are, the one that is treif is peeled. The other eggs don't make a difference, even if they're not peeled.
Yeah, the one, if they have a shell on it,
Yeah. Eventually we'll learn in Hilchos Taaruvot about combination of all kinds of things that are mevatel. Now,
So one egg.
why do we need an extra egg? 61. In a tafshil, there are no eggs, for the most part, basically, from what we see. But if I have eggs, I need 61. So why do I need 61? And this explanation, of course, concerns our halacha here too. So let me read this halacha, and then we'll see how everything fits. So Seif Zayin reads, Beitza sheyesh bo efroach, if it has an efroach, a cheek growing in it, or tipas dam, or forbidden type of blood in it, shenizbash lemacheres, that got cooked with the rest, tzorech shishim ve'achas, levato plitoso. You need 61 to be mevatel de plito. As opposed to what? Not only is this unique that I need 61 versus 60, but it's only talking about plitoso. It's not talking about the egg. The egg will remain aser. I don't know yet why.
This is what?
What came out of the egg. Now, in the Beitza sheyesh bo efroach, even though the Mechaber here does not say it, he does say it in Siman Pei Vov Beitzim. The same, pretty much similar halacha. And he says like this: Beitza sheyesh bo efroach o dam o seres hamizbah shel imo afilu im eino kelufo. I'm curious why he didn't say that here, because here he's not talking about beitzim. But over there, since he's talking about the difference between shelled eggs versus non-shelled, he says if that egg has an efroach, it makes no difference if it had a shell on or not. Why? Because there's basar in that egg already. And what's coming out through the shell of the egg is the tam of the basar of the efroach. And that shell is not strong enough to hold back tam coming from the efroach now versus regular tam coming from an ordinary egg, which is just maya be'alma, just the regular water, almost like water, plain liquid, no taste. So the shells are good on ordinary eggs, but in an egg that has an efroach, it's not just plain water. This is tam of the basar that's already in the beitza. So that's why it's a problem, even if it's not kalufa, even if it has its shell on. But I still have to figure out two things. Why do I need 61? In the tafshil, or in the eggs. The tafshil I only need 60 here. And even though by efroach I need 61 for some reason.
What about the dam?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Whether it's dam or efroach, I will need 61. The Mechaber's example in Taaruvot is Beitza sheyesh b'efroach or tipas dam shenizbash lo macheres. So we're talking about eggs, not a tafshil. But in a tafshil situation, you're only going to need 60. So let's figure out why here 60 if it's a regular tafshil, but if it's egg 61. What's the reason for having 61? Now, do you remember what else in Taaruvot or in Basar is you don't need 60?
You don't need.
You don't need 60.
So
you need less than 60.
Chal.
Chal, which is the next seif. So it's interesting, the Mechaber here brings down two halachas here, one next to each other, which are atypical. In other words, they don't need the typical 60. Either you need 61 or you need 59. In the Ramah, which we'll be covering another time, maybe Thursday, maybe next week, we'll be seeing situations which we talked about in the beginning of the shir, where you can have something which is not batal at all, even the mashalu, like the ainesach and the like. There are other kinds of taruvos, but for the most part, all taruvos are either rav or 60. So here you have two situations where one is 61 and the next one is 59. So what's the reason for 61? So there's two basic explanations. The general explanation is, the majority of Rishonim, including the Ramban, I believe, the Rosh, the Ran, the Tur, because eggs come in different sizes, the Chachamim were a little bit more strict to require more than 60. So you shouldn't have to begin to figure out, well, I have 60, but it's of this size. But if it's this size, I need maybe a little. In order to avoid the problem, since eggs come in different sizes, they said 61. Add one more egg.
Volume you're doing by numbers.
Right. In this way, you're safe. You have the required amount. Grade A or grade AA eggs? Is that the grade doesn't have to do always with the size.
Yeah, usually, if it's going to be smaller than AA, then plain.
Yeah. The grade actually has to do with quality too. So that's the basic explanation given on why eggs is 61. But that's only eggs versus eggs. If you have those forbidden eggs in a tafshil, then you really don't have that situation anymore. So you just need the basic 60. Okay, so the Mechaber says you need 61 levatel plitoso. The emphasis here is plitoso we're concerned with, but the egg itself remains asur. The egg is not going to become batal for some reason. What's the other explanation given? The Rambam. The Rambam says because an egg is like a birya, which we'll be learning later on in Halacha Taaruvot. There are certain things that are not batal afilu be'elef, even in 1,000. Certain things that have chashivas, that have importance. A birya, a whole creature, like an efroach. Things that are counted, they're valuable that you actually count them. And we'll be talking about chaticha ruya leiskabed. It's not an ordinary piece of meat. It's a big steak. It's a big piece, right? So it's not just a small piece. In these situations, midirabanan, they said it's not batal. So eventually, this is an interesting area of Hilchos Taaruvos as to what do you do if an entire chicken gets mixed up versus just a small piece of the chicken, or just a small piece of an entire animal. One of them is treif here. It makes things more complicated. And eventually, we'll talk about that. So the Rambam says it's because it resembles a birya, or it is a birya. And the Kesef Mishnah, I believe, explains that in order to make a heker, that this egg itself will not be batal in ordinary situations by the regular amount. So they made a heker that it's with other eggs, you need 61. Right? Since the reason is that it's like a birya, then the Chachamim made a heker that you would require one extra egg to be mevatalet, not your ordinary 60, because it's like a birya. That's the reason it's like a birya. What's the nafkamina between these two shitas? We have several nafkaminas between the two shitas, of whatever explanation you give.
Because it's a birya?
Yeah, it's like a birya, or it resembles like a birya. The question is, there's a question in the Rambam, does he say that only when there's an efroach, when there's a chick in it, growing in it, or does he give that explanation even if there's no chick growing? Because according to some, it appears to be that only when there's an efroach does he say that, but it could be that he says that even when there's no efroach. And I would like to say that it's possibly, that is why the Mechaber himself, that everybody remains in a tzorechiyun. The Shach, the Taz, or Shulchan, everybody has a problem with the Mechaber in Hilchas Beitzin when he says that an egg, whether it's an avela or a treifa, got mixed up with other eggs, mixed up. The elef, kulon asuros, they're all asur. Min b'mino, yavish b'yavish, what's the problem here? Now you might say, well, perhaps the Mechaber says it's one of those things that are counted, like the Ramah says. But the Mechaber clearly says, I don't have a problem with things that are counted. Later on in Hilchos Taaruvos, he doesn't have a problem with that. See if I can find it here. Anyway, Mechaber doesn't have a problem with things that are counted like the Ramah does. So that cannot be the explanation. So how come here he says it's also, he doesn't give an explanation for it. And it can't be because of Davar Shebeminya, because he doesn't hold that Davar Shebeminya is not Bato. The Ramah says fine, that's the reason. And so do others, it's Davar Shebeminya, but the Mechaber doesn't seem to say that that's a problem. If that's the case, why does he answer one egg being mixed in 1,000 eggs? Here, remember, here we're not talking about cooking, where there's a plito. Here we're talking about just a regular mixture. One egg, not even in 1,000? What's the problem? But it could be, according to the way the Aruch HaShulchan learns, and even the Taz, I think, it could be that they understood that the Rambam says that in either case, whether it has an efroach or not an efroach, an egg requires 61 in cases of bishul, because it's like a birya. Because it's like a birya, maybe the Mechaber, that's what I'm saying, maybe the Mechaber is learning like that, like the Rambam in that sense, that perhaps because at least it resembles, we were machmir on an egg. Not because it's a davar shebeminya like everybody else is learning, but maybe like the Rambam may be learning, that it resembles more a birya, even if there's no efroach inside. An egg without an efroach, why should it be like a birya? But it's almost like a birya. For whatever reason. It could be the Rambam learns pshat in an egg, whether it has an efroach or not. Not everybody does. Everybody says the Rambam may have said that only in an egg that has an efroach. That's, everybody agrees it's a birya. Right? But the Rambam was saying legabe cooking, that's why we need 61. Where everybody else was saying that's not the reason why we need 61. An egg that has an efrach is a birya, possibly. But the reason why we need 61 is why? Because eggs come in different sizes. All right. So since these are the two shitas, let's just basically see what's the nafkamina between the two shitas. Whether you hold the reason is that it's like a birya, or whether you hold because eggs come in different sizes. If you have an egg in a tafshil, there's no eggs, there's just a tafshil. According to the Rambam, you still would need 61, because he holds the reason why you need 61 is because of a birya. What difference does it make to me then if I have a tafshil or if I have eggs over here? So according to the Rambam, you would always need 61. If that's the reason why I need 61, does it make a difference where the egg falls into? You see? Whereas the Mechaber makes a distinction, in Hilchas Beitzim at least, that if it's a tafshil, I only need 60. It's only when I have other eggs, because eggs come in different sizes, the Chachamim were required an additional egg. It's eggs. They're all eggs. But if it's a tafshil is 60, where the Rambam would hold, I need 61 regardless.
The second opinion.
Yeah.
The size eggs.
Right.
Where today the typical size egg. All
Right.
the time.
Right.
That,
Well, but we still have...
I'm wondering whether the rationale...
We don't have the problem with regular eggs. It's only when we have an egg that is not kosher.
I understand
Right.
that, but if you had
But
one that was...
you would need 61, because the halacha is still the same. The Chachamim requires 61, even though most of the eggs are the same. And they're not, actually.
No, but you could...
Yeah.
Today, most houses, what they buy,
Yeah.
regardless of
Right.
where they get it from,
Right.
whether it's...
Yeah, but the halacha would still be the same. What's the second example of nafkamina? Beitza trufa. You mixed it. It's not intact anymore with other eggs. According to the Rambam, 60. This is the opposite. The Rambam would be lenient. Says I only need 60 here. Why? Because I no longer have a birya over here. As we will eventually learn by birya, if the birya is smashed, cut up to pieces, it's not a birya anymore. Yeah. What happens if you find you know what they say? There's a joke about what's worse than finding a worm in an apple. Finding a apple one. Yeah. Eventually we'll see the difference when we learn about bugs and all kinds of things found. Does it make a difference if it's missing a couple legs or not? Yeah, all these things make a difference. If it's dead, we don't want to eat anything regardless. But these things can make a difference if it's no longer recognizable.
Went through process.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So with the Rambam, according to the Rambam, that this is because of a birya, this is no more birya if it's trufa, if it's all mixed. According to the other ones, it makes no difference if it's trufa or not. I still need 61. Or what is the third scenario? The third scenario, if you don't have an egg of a froch at all. Let's say you have a base of a treifa or nevela. According to the Rambam Lechora, all you need is 60 also. Why? Because there's no efrach, there's no birya. According to the ones who learn pshat in the Rambam, that he only says birya when there's a real efrach. And everybody else says, I don't care what kind of an egg it is, 61 because of the eggs. Eventually in Siman Kaf Zayin we will also be learning that once you do have eggs or anything that is asur, that you're going to be taking it out. To remove it, you have to know how to take out, how to remove it. If you don't remove it properly, you can make everything else down below remaining a problem. Just like you had in Basar B'Cholov too, how to pour, right? How to pour the milk on the other side, or the meat, or whatever it is. There's also a way to how to remove an isser, how to remove a non-kosher egg from the mixture without, causing problems. So that's in Siman Kaf Zayin. Just before we go, as far as Chal in Sif Ches, since Chal is already discussed in the past and we briefly talked about how it's different, just very mamash bekitsur, Chal, as you know, is osir midrabanan, the milk in it. It's not a real isser.
It's the udder, no?
The udder, right. And there are ways to prepare it, to cut it up, and to bang it, and to remove the milk. The Chachamim said this is the way to eat it. If you want to prepare it, if you want to eat it, you have to prepare it in a certain way. The best way is to do it on the barbecue and not to cook it, and especially not to cook it with other meat, because all kinds of issues can come about. If you didn't prepare it properly, some milk nevertheless went out, even though it's meat even though it's chalav the milk that went out, nevertheless it's midrabanan. So the Mechaber says like this: so chal mizbatel b'tisha v'chamishim, 59. Why 59? So this is the opposite. This is not 61. Here we're a little bit more lenient. Why are we more lenient with Chal? As Rashi points out, because Chal is a min hetera in itself. It's not really Asr. And in order to make this distinction, in other words, that it's not Asr. It in itself is not Asr. Therefore, you can combine it in the shear of 60. In other words, you can combine it. You only really need 59 against it. But then the Chal remains Asr. The Chal remains still Asr, midrabana. It's like Chana, it's a form of Chanan, because of what went in, according to one shot. What went out got mixed with milk, if you cooked it with meat, that is, not if you cooked it by itself. If you cooked it by itself, but the Mechaber at least says it, you cooked it with other meat, so you have the milk that it has within its walls going out, absorbing meat, and going back into it. Yeah. Or another situation where you have the Chal that right now was in a pot, and everything else is kosher. Okay. What if you took that Chal and cooked it again with other meat? So in the other situation, you would not say 59. You would have to say 60. In other words, that's if in the first case it became Asr. That's only if in the first case it became Asr. You don't say that the second time around you can also apply 59.
That was if it was cooked with meat.
That's only if it was cooked and I did not say it clearly, there was not enough to be mevatalet. If there's enough to mevatalet, you're back to square one. It's the same halacha, but if you did not have enough to mevatalet the first time around, now the Chal is cooked again a second time, you do not have that advantage of 59. So what the Mechaber says here, 59, is only the first time around. If it happens again, then that Chal, you need 60 against it, because it's a form of Chanan. We're machmir on that.
So that is if the Chal, the other round, was cooked with meat.
Right, with milk, right, as opposed to being cooked by itself.
So it was cooked with potatoes.
Right, it's not a problem, yeah.
Do we need 59?
You still only need 59.
You need 59?
Yeah, because remember that the Chiddush is you include the Chal itself.
Right, no, but my question is, why do you need 59?
He's asking, there's nothing, just potatoes.
There's just potatoes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
That you're cooking the udder with its milk with potatoes.
No, then you don't, it's like you're cooking it in water, then you don't have a problem.
Then you don't have a problem.
You don't have that problem, because what are you going to ask over here? You're not going to ask you to.
So
I'm
the
sorry.
Potatoes you can
I didn't understand you. Right. The potatoes wouldn't be a problem. It's only with meat.
So the udder you would not be able to meat, even though you don't need 60.
Well, that's b'di'evet. The question is, can you eat the udder or not? So the Mechaber says no problem. B'di'evet, there's no problem with the udder itself. The real issue only begins with other meat.
So
that's
if there's
correct.
other meat in the pot, then you have a problem because of the chalav shchuta in the udder.
Right. It's chalav shchuta, right, which is the Rabbanan. And by itself, b'di'evet, it really would be okay. The Chachamim say you have to prepare it in a certain way. Don't eat it like that. But if it did happen by itself, it's not as big as a problem as it is if you cooked it with other meat. And the same is true if you cooked it once and then it got cooked again. If it became a form of Hanan the first time,
so it's
a form of Hanan, then later on the second time you don't have the advantage of 59, you need 6 against the whole thing.
Now I have a question.
Right.
So the first time it was cooked with meat.
Right.
And then it falls into a pot with potatoes. Do we say now the udder, because of the meat it absorbed with the chalav shchuta, is
No. It's only going to be a problem with meat, not with potatoes.
The second time around?
Even the second time around.
But our problem the second time around...
The Chal will remain Asr.
Yeah, no, my question is, the second time around we say we need meat because of this strange rabbinical type of Hanan.
Right, but only...
So why don't I have that Hanan when I have potatoes?
That's a good question, yeah, because it's not a real Hanan. I don't believe it would be a problem with... It's a form of Hanan. It's a Chumrah. It's not a real Hanan.
So, B'chlal, the Chumrah will only have if I cook it with meat.
It's only a Chumrah. And some say it's a Chumrah because it's a form of Hanan. That's what's happening too. But that's a good question, because if you say Hanan, it should be applying to other things too. But I don't believe it would be a problem with potatoes. Now, but
it would be strange. If I don't need 60, or even 59, when I cook it with the potatoes the first time around, so now that I cooked it with meat the first time around, and it fell into potatoes, why would it be any worse? If you did say that you need 60 the second time around, if it was cooked with
meat.
Potatoes.
No, with potatoes, no.
Right.
So only with meat. Right. So we just have Rashi explaining that with Chal, it's a heter, and that is why it's different. It only needs 59. And the second explanation, which is a very interesting explanation, is the Rambam again. The Rambam says it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. And because it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, the Chachamim made a heker in it. This is a D'Rabbanan. And therefore, you only need 59. But the Rashba says, wait a minute. The Rashba says, all these Shur D'Rabbanan need 60. What do I get? Of course this is a D'Rabbanan. So the Rashba disagrees with him and says everything requires 60. That would not be the reason to say that here is 59. But anyway, it could be, Pashut Pshat in the Rambam, it could be that the Rambam is basically saying, listen, this is something very, very different. And they wanted to point it out. It's not your regular Basar b'chalav, even though it's a D'Rabbanan, but it's not your typical. So in order to bring this out, this unique difference between Chal, Basar, Chalav, which apparently it does have, they made this distinction by giving you a smaller shear because, as Rashi points out, which is basically the same idea, it's a heter, it's not a big deal. So maybe it's a language difference between the Rambam and everybody else.
But we have here a different situation.
Yeah.
The halav shchuta itself.
Right.
Now, when I say I have a suffix d'Rabbanan, because I don't know how much halav shchuta there is.
Right.
So normally I should go l'kula. But here I'm going l'chumra by saying I'm going to assume that the whole other is halav shchuta. That's the volume.
Right, that's the volume
So
of
now
it.
I'm going l'chumra on a Rabbanan.
Yes.
So now that I went l'chumra on a Rabbanan, maybe that is an additional argument why to say
that,
so. Then you need to.
That I always
not
know.
60.
That I always do because I don't know how much it's going to emit, how much it's going to come
That's
out.
by the Oraisa.
No, even in the Rabbanan, we're not mechalek. In the shir, Isser is an Isser, and we're not mechalek. We don't know how much came out, as we've been discussing before in the other seifim. When we don't know and we have an Isser, we figure against the whole. But this is a hetera. But it's a heter. But it's a heter, and therefore it's a unique heter, like Rashi says, that you are allowed to include the basar itself of the chal in being mevatel the milk, which therefore means you only need 59.
And why not? There's nothing other of the
Right. Exactly. And let me know what it tastes like. I've never had it. If you ever had a chance.
I hear it's not very delicious.
Yeah, well, I guess like everything else, it depends how you prepare it. So anyway, that is the gist of Zayin and Ches, and talking about the situation where you need sometimes 61 with eggs and sometimes 59 with Chal. The halachas of Chal, of course, are discussed in Siman Tzadik, before of what happens. But the Mechaber brought it down over here just to give us an example of certain situations where 60 is not what is required. You either need more or you need less, and as we will see another time, that there are certain Yisurim that even require much more than 6, or that they're never bottled at all because of some reason, their importance. We'll discuss it next time.